From the shadows of the unknown, from the front lines of truth-seeking, this is the show that cuts through the garbage and tells it like it is. No hype, no spin, just raw, unfiltered truth. This is Forbidden Realms with your host, Gary Anderson. And yeah, Gary is back, and he's taking no prisoners.
And it is the 28th of November. I tell you, time has gone by so fast, JC, and that is so interesting. You know, I'm telling you, I had a nightmare. You know, I've been making these videos to promote the show, but I did this one where the car was full of turkeys. And remember, I did the one with you. We're on a table, and there was turkeys all around the table, and they were going to carve.
Yeah, I do remember that, matter of fact.
Well, last night I had a nightmare.
Sounds like a karma nightmare.
Yeah, my wife brought a new bird home.
Uh-oh, what kind was it?
You ready for this? It was a turkey. A turkey of all birds. I mean, she has her parrots or, you know, all this stuff. But I had a dream it was a giant turkey.
Yeah, it's coming to seek its revenge.
Or something, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
Yeah, it was pretty good, actually. Actually, got a little bit of snow. We had a white Thanksgiving, I guess you could say. Of course, it all melted, but cold, very cold. So I guess winter is officially here.
Oh, yeah. It's a good time to go out Bigfoot hunting. You know that.
It is. It is a good time because there's less foliage on the trees. So, you know, they don't have so much to hide. But yes, now is a good time.
Yeah, you can follow their footprints and all that.
Yeah, the snow is always a good chance to get out there and find some. I haven't been out for a while, but I know 3 years ago I did find that tree break, and I did find a footprint, but it wasn't really defined. But it was big print.
Big, only one footprint.
Only one, and what had happened? It was a little bit of a side of a kind of a hill, and what had happened? The ground had gave away a little bit. And then about 50 feet ahead was this 8-foot little sapling, 6 inches round probably. That 8 foot up looked like somebody took with their two hands and just twisted it, and there was no other tree falls or snow falls, whatever you want to call it, around it. I mean, I can't prove it was Bigfoot, but I mean, it was in an area that was a lot of sightings, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, tonight we have a great show, too. We're going to cover a lot of different things about Bigfoot with Lance Hightower. And, you know, he's had his, investigations, for years on Bigfoot. You know, a lot of people think Bigfoot is not real. They are real. The thing is, you're not going to find them next to your campground. You're not going to find them in your backyard. You have to go away from the population because they're not humans. And a lot of people think that they have the same thoughts as me and you. Well, they don't.
No, they don't. And that's the thing. And even if they were similar to humans, all humans aren't good. There's good days and bad days and different personalities. You don't know. They're unpredictable. I think that's
they're not human.
No.
Okay. I feel sorry for the people that think they have thoughts like humans do.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. Who knows what they're thinking? And they're smarter than the average animal, so it kind of makes them possibly more dangerous if you're not careful.
Well, let's find out some information about our guests. What do you think about that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Lance Hightower is one of the leading investigators in the field of creature paranormal encounters, especially when referring to the subject of Sasquatch and a creature called Dogman. For the past 9 years, he has had one of the most successful YouTube podcast channels in the country called Monster 911, in which he interviews eyewitnesses from all over the planet who call his nationwide Creature Report Hotline after witnessing firsthand the unexplainable and terrifying presence of a living, breathing monster. Lance Hightower's paranormal podcast show is quite unique.
Well, Lance, welcome to the show, my friend. And how are you doing? And how was your Thanksgiving?
Appreciate it. It was wonderful. Had family and lots of desserts.
How many pounds did you gain?
Oh, I don't even know. My wife actually weighs it every day, and I said I'm going to forgo it for about a week.
I'm going to forgo it for about 6 months after last night. How old were you when you got interested in these hairy creatures?
I was about, it's interesting you say that. I was just thinking that this past week. I was right at about 7 years old, 6 or 7, and I was at an old-time grocery store in a very small town of Braggs, Oklahoma. And on the bottom of this book rack, magazine rack, there was a book, a paperback book, and it cost me an entire month of allowance of $1.25, and it was, I believe it was by Lauren Green. And it was about, it had interesting pictures in there, black and whites, and it was, I think it was published in 1974. And I was hooked after that, of some unknown creature, monster, and it was primarily centered in the Northwest, but I was so highly fascinated that such a creature could exist. I was just eaten up with it. And then, of course, after that, it wasn't short after that, The Legend of Boggy Creek came out, and I pestered my dad for, I think, about every week for I don't know how long, and finally we went to it. And then after that, of course, I had nightmares for about 6 months.
That would do it, I'll tell you that.
But I was about 6 or 7 when I first became smitten with it.
Well, you sure, it took my encounter. I never believed in Bigfoot at all, Lance. I didn't think they even existed because I just didn't believe it. And then, it got to the point when I had my encounter, it really confused me for a long time afterwards. It scared me. I mean, everything you learned in school, you might throw it out. Everything you learned in science, throw it out. And then you got the people say, oh, they don't exist. Then you got the people that say they do exist. Now, out of the people that say they do exist, you have to take a certain percentage and realize that there's a certain percentage of people out there are totally what they say is garbage.
Yes, you're right. I mean, and it's the context of which people say they exist or don't exist, too, I'm always fascinated with. People always tend to speak in absolutes, because the people that say they don't exist, well, have you ever actually been out in the woods, or have you been to the local city zoo? And most of these people that speak in absolutes really have never gone out into the woods. Like we were talking, they've really never camped out in the wilderness. And so, and that's fair. They have that choice of belief. But the people that have been out in the woods, that have seen, and I know my dad, he's been out in the woods years and years and years, and he taught me a lot how to hunt and trap and track. But he comes up with good questions, and they're fair questions. How come I haven't seen one? And the best answer I can give is that I really can't answer that. But how do you know that something has not seen you and decided not to reveal itself? That's the question we'll never know, because every time he's been in the woods, he's always had a knife, a bow, a gun, something that could be harmful to it. And if these creatures or these beings are as intelligent as we say they are, then would you step out in front of some human that tends to respond and react by shooting something quickly? Especially if it's a human that's immediately frightened, I probably wouldn't step out myself. So, it's very interesting dynamics of people on both sides. They absolutely don't exist. They absolutely do exist. But the people that say they do exist have had, I found, they've seen something they couldn't explain. They compare it to what they know as far as reference to animals and the wild, and they know what it wasn't. And that's the people to say, I think I saw one, Lance, or I absolutely had an encounter and it terrified me.
Well, you've been doing this a long time. If you took a percentage, how many of all the people you've interviewed and did research on where you thought were telling the truth versus the ones that you figured they're into it for their 2 seconds of fame?
I would say, and I've thought about this too, I've taken, since 2017, I've actually removed 2 shows that I found out that they were kind of pulling my leg and hoaxing me. So 2 shows, I would say, in my personal opinion, about 98 to 99% of the people that call me have truthfully seen something. They have experienced something. Now, not all the calls revolve around Bigfoot or Dogman. It's a whole collection this past year of various creatures I don't even have a name for. But I would say the majority of the people that have called me, I started really getting into more of the psychology and coping, how people cope with the encounter and inability to cope. Really kind of fascinated me with a background in healthcare. So I thought I could still help these people kind of go through this coping mechanism of what it was they saw, what was the context. Let's try to find out together. And so it kind of developed this trust. And so other people that normally wouldn't tell, they started calling me. And so I would say a very high percentage of the people that call me truthfully have seen something that terrified them, that they know it wasn't human.
The thing is, again, when a person sees something like this, your brain goes into shock. Mm-hmm. It really does, because your brain is denying what you're seeing. That's
right. When we end up in this immediacy of when we see something that we go, our body first responds. We've heard of the fight or flight so many times, but actually there's a third element that precedes this that's called freeze, fight, or flight. And this is part of the human, our sympathetic nervous system that is part of our survival. So we'll freeze, and during that process, our brain is going, is this human? Is this not human? Is this animal? Is this human? Is this not? It's in hyperspeed. And then, so part of the brain called the amygdala is kind of this primitive area. It's trying to, do I freeze? Do I run? Or do I fight? And then if for whatever reason you snap out of it and come back to reality, the part of the brain that's the frontal cortex that has logic says, you need to grab your gun. You need to run now, but run backwards. You need to do this. You start to have this plan formulating. And I see this repeatedly over and over, Gary, when people first have an encounter, especially a very close encounter. Your first instinct isn't to grab a camera or a firearm. Their first reaction is, what the heck am I looking at? Is this real? Is this real? Is this happening? And so that's why people don't get pictures or video. They're trying to figure, what is this? What am I looking at? And it's just this fear and this flood of cortisol, and everything that's going through their body is just this rush of adrenaline. And then when they figure out, this is real, I got to get out of here, or whatever their next move is. So it's really a whole paradox of chemicals and emotions when people see this. And a lot of people say it's time slowed down. They feel time slowed down. And usually you hear that, not in all encounters with Bigfoot, but it's a very common statement when people have a very high level of fear. They will say that. And that is a combination of our brain trying to process, what am I looking at? This looks like a monster I've never seen. So something, people fear what they don't understand, but more so when it looks like a monster.
Oh, you're so right. In the case like with me, I was holding a camera. Did I take a picture? Did I actually take a picture of it when it charged? No. The only thought I had in my mind was to get the you-know-what out of there. And that's when I took off running. Like I've said on the show before, I left a couple $1,000s worth of lenses on the ground in a camera bag I never went back to get because I refused to go back in there after my experience. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to be one of the 411 missing.
I didn't hear that you left the lenses.
Oh, yeah. I left a bunch of lenses.
And that's another feature. I've had interviews where the hunter dropped his gun, his $3,000 gun, or I did an interview with a guy that left like $3,000 worth of bow equipment, a very expensive jacket, his lunch, a camera, and left it all in the tree, fell out of the tree, broke his leg, and climbed his way back to his truck and just left everything. So when you hear that, you know that most hunters, you don't leave expensive gear on the ground or in the tree. That is a no-no. So when you hear that, you know that they saw something they've never seen before. Otherwise, they would stay there. They would get it. They would shoot at it, things like that. But when you hear hunters say, I didn't have enough gun, or I was afraid I was just going to tick it off, and they had like a high-powered rifle, that is a statement that they were frightened because of the size, because of something they've seen for the first time, and they quickly analyzed, I'm going to be in a world of hurt if I decide to retaliate against this creature.
How can you? Because you're talking something that's between 7 and 10 feet tall.
Yes.
You're talking something that's between 500 and probably 800-pound range.
That's correct.
And has huge muscles compared to a human. And the capability, what they could do to you versus what you could do to them, I mean, that is, to the point, it's scary. Now, I'll tell you a little quick story. My uncle was an avid hunter, and he liked shooting bear, and he liked bear meat. And this is when I was a kid. I heard the whole story because my dad was freaked out. So my uncle was at Mount Shasta. Mount Shasta was very popular for hunters and Bigfoot hunters and just hunters in general years ago. He would go hunting with his two sons, and he saw this perfect bear. So he took a shot, but he thought he had a kill shot. It didn't kill the bear, and the bear kept coming. And before he could get a second shot off, the bear was mauling him, and his son managed to kill the bear, but he was in the hospital for a month. They didn't even know if he was going to survive because of that mauling of the bear. And he had scars like you wouldn't believe that would never go away. If you're out there looking for Bigfoot or anything, there's, like we were talking before the show, there's other creatures out there that could attack you, not just Bigfoot.
Yes, you're right. And I'm going to say, even though these creatures, these beings obviously exist, that the likelihood of being attacked by something is going to be more so in line with the natural indigenous creatures of that particular area. Like you and I were talking, people, it just, bewilders me when people go out and they don't have a means to protect themselves. They just have a camera, they're walking down a trail they've never been down, and they have no means besides their two legs to run. But you have mountain lions, you have cougars, you have bears, you have coyotes that could pack up, you have rogue dogs, you have wild hogs or boars out there, and you run into a pack with a sow, she's got her piglets. You got a problem on your hands. So there's a whole host of things that could go wrong really fast just with indigenous wildlife. And I tell people, have a game plan, have a plan B, a C, and a D, because you said it well, Gary. I mean, I don't want to be a David Paulides missing 411 person. And even Mr. Paulides talks about not only weather conditions being a factor and people being, missing, but the indigenous wildlife, people break an ankle, they fall off and they knock themselves out on a slippery rock crossing a creek or a stream, and they wake up and you're surrounded by, you're being drug off by a pack of wolves or something. Who knows? But having contingency plans, telling people where you're at and going, and try not to go by yourself is always a good plan.
I would never recommend going by yourself, because what happened if you did? You're out 5 miles and you slip and you break your leg or your ankle or whatever. How are you going to get back? Who's going to find you? And, if you're out in that situation, your life expectancy is short. Trust me.
Yes, you're right. And, there's these creatures. There has been some cases, and even some of the works of David Paulides' work, that I've interviewed people where there has been some apparent cases where these Sasquatch, Bigfoot, have assisted people that were hunters that were injured. But in the grand scheme of it, not that, maybe it just falls along the type of person that calls me, but more than not, the majority of the Sasquatch close encounters are very cautious. The Sasquatch cautious, and they have an element of bearing some level of teeth, of growling, and in some cases, it is rare, in some cases, acting very much like your encounter, where it's highly aggressive. And if the person did not act and remove themselves from the situation, they don't know what would have happened. They don't think they would have been there. They are no longer alive.
Well, I got to know the medicine woman. This is years ago, for the Muckleshoot Indian tribe. And also because my daughter married into the tribe. And after that marriage, she married into the Nisqually tribe in Washington State. And I got to know the medicine man there. And I talked to him, because I've always been intrigued with my encounter of Bigfoot. So I asked him questions. And the questions I got from the Muckleshoot, the medicine woman, told me this, that back in the 1800s and before that, and even in the 1900s and 1920s, that, they would be out there and the women would be washing the clothing, and they would have the babies there, and a bunch of Bigfoot would run through and grab the babies, grab the women. They'd also run into the village and run out with, women. And then the warriors would go out to, looking for their loved ones, and they didn't find them alive. And the Nisqually tribe, it's down by the ocean and the forests around there. It was a big forest area. It still is for logging. Again, they talked about Bigfoot would actually come in and attack them. And they would go back and then, try to kill off some of them. Here's the point, is that it tells you that, yeah, they have intelligence, but where is it at?
You hit on a good point, is that some people, and, it varies, but in certain groups or in certain discussions at conferences, you've always got people that splinter off and say, well, they're always nice. They always will befriend you, or everybody knows that they only attack if you do this or if you do that. And I guess I'm of the premise or belief that I'm very cautious about this. I don't trust what they're going to do or not do, because I think you said it best, Gary. Their thinking is not like a human. They don't think the same way as a human. They have some tendencies that are human-like, but for the most part, they're very reactive. We don't know what's going on in their brain or context of what happened prior to us seeing them. So I am the belief I would not trust an encounter if I had one up close at all. I would be very cautious. I would be watching body language, and I just, I wonder what went on with that conversation that you had with that medicine man. I'm fascinated to find out what had happened previously for them to go through and take the children and the women. And I mean, that's terrifying to think of.
Well, you know what I was told, it was going on for a long period of time. You know, they didn't write things down like we do. And, you know, they story tell about what happened. But here's the thing. If you talk to other Indian tribes, even in California, and if you get to know people and then you bring up Bigfoot, they all have the same type of information to share with you. And that tells me, you know, they didn't have internet. They didn't have a phone to call up. Hey, Henry, we just had a bunch of Bigfoot come through the village. Why is that depending on the tribe, even in Florida, all the different tribes, they all talk about Bigfoot. They all talk about them being aggressive.
Yeah, I don't. That's very interesting. I'm not sure of that. And you know, this gets into things where people will talk about legends and folklore and tales that are told. And this is why, you know, that old adage that you hear, somewhere in the middle of these lies the truth. And I think because there really wasn't a written language during that time, you know, these stories started dying off, or they may have gotten stretched out a little bit, but they start dying off. And so when you hear these stories again, people just automatically say, oh, that was just to keep the kids in and get them in because it's getting late. And I've heard that, and I'm like, well, I don't think so. There might be more truth to that legend than what you think.
Well, I will say this: we need to take a break, and then we'll come back and continue on, even about, you know, DNA with them. But here's what I was told: they're cannibals. That's what I was told. They're cannibals, and I heard that from a medicine woman and a medicine man, from two different tribes, from different parts of the state of Washington. So that makes me wonder if they were. And again, they're not humans. So if they look at a human or another animal, they don't digest, oh, they're human, we're going to be friends with them. I just don't buy that. So we'll be back with Lance right after this. So stay tuned.
I know it's kinda late. I hope I didn't wake you, but what I've gotta say can't wait. I know you'd understand. 'Cause every time I tried to tell you, the words just came out wrong. So I have to say I love you in a song. Yeah, I know it's kinda strange. Every time I'm near you, I just run out of things to say. I know you'd understand. 'Cause every time I tried to tell you, the words just came out wrong. So I'll have to say I love you in a song.
From the great Northwest, deep in the forest shadows, this is Forbidden Realms. And now, here's Gary.
And we are back with Lance. And Lance, my question to you is DNA. I know that people have collected it. There was a lady who actually analyzed it and said, well, it's not human, and we can't figure out, it's not bear. I don't know what to classify it. But then her reputation with what she did was damaged because nobody really wants to take the DNA of somebody claiming it's a Bigfoot. And plus, the cost to send off the DNA and get the report and all that is a lot of money.
It is. And that study was, my brother and I read that study on one show just to put it in kind of frank terms and kind of layman terms. And we found that it was actually a very well done study. And she really did the study very, very well. And to really, you're assuming a lot of things. You're assuming that the researchers that go out in the field are collecting a true specimen of a DNA specimen from this creature. And then the next thing is to have viable tissue, enough tissue that can be procured for the study. And then you hit it on the head. Most people can't, you're talking millions of dollars worth of equipment. And so some of this equipment is usually at universities, medical universities, or medical schools, or hospital facilities, and that can afford this high-level equipment to look at the DNA and to classify it appropriately. So it takes a lot of money, a lot of man and woman power to do, and you have to have the right equipment. So it's just not something you can go down to a lab and get done in 15 minutes. And so it's a lot of effort. And in her findings, basically, you hit it. She said that this was almost a separate species. And she faced a lot of backlash and ridicule over this. Unfortunately, not only from the universities that she submitted the specimens to, they didn't want anything to do with this. But some of the backlash, a majority of it, came from the very people that she was trying to work with. Not necessarily in her group, but people in the community, was kind of the back against her, so to speak, and it was really disappointing to hear.
Yeah, it really wrecked her reputation and caused her a lot of financial hardship. I mean, a lot of people were threatening her with her life even. That's how bad it got. But, here's the other thing, okay? Most people go out there and try to collect DNA on this stuff. They read books. They don't know how to do it. So, I mean, the chance of if you go out there and try to collect DNA, unless you know what you're looking for and how to do it, is going to be contaminated.
Yeah, and it's true. Most of it will be. If you're picking it up with your fingers, you can't do that. It has to be, and even if you pick a hair up, that does not really classify that you can take it and you can get the DNA. You're really looking for something with hair, with a follicle, with tissue on it. And if you do that, it could be contaminated of the surrounding environment. If you don't use semi-sterile techniques and you have a glove, or you put it in a sterile type of specimen tube, there's a whole host of possible contaminations or false positives or negatives that you can get. And that's the thing that this researcher did very, very well, is she actually measured all the possible ways that contamination could exist in her specimens. And she got great results, so much so that the universities and these facilities where she did the testing, they go, we don't want any part of it. After she said she tested it but did not include her results, she actually just went off the results in the field. And when they came back, they matched her results, which was a different species entirely.
Well, again, if you think about this, I had on 2 weeks ago, Christopher George was a law enforcement ranger, park ranger. He also was in charge of a lot of forest land before he retired. And he told us stories, and I had him on the show a couple times through the years, of things that, like footprints in the snow, Bigfoot, that go out to a certain point and then stop. And it was no sign of turning around and going back. Now, a lot of people say, oh, he's just a park ranger, but he's in the law enforcement side of it. And a lot of people don't realize that they actually have more training than a lot of police departments have with their police officers. So, I mean, they do multiple things. So, and he talked about, again, even rangers, park rangers would disappear, and a lot of people disappear. And then the service hides the information where nobody can get a hold of it.
Yeah, that still baffles me with prints in the snow, and then they just disappear. My natural inclination would be, is there any trees around in the area that could have jumped from a tree from that point in time?
How about a portal?
Pardon me?
A portal. Because, I
What
had,
portal? That's
Michio
another thing.
Kaku said that we're so close to cracking the fifth dimension. I was reading a science journal last week that, we're very now close to cracking the fifth dimension, which then means portals could exist, parallel universes, could all come together. So maybe, like people claim that when they see a Bigfoot, some people claim there's a portal there and that the Bigfoot walks into the portal and vanishes or comes out of a portal. Have you heard anything like that?
Well, I have not so much, not a lot in the interviews that I've done, but more so in the readings with the Missing 411 with David Paulides. I've seen a lot of that where the investigators will come to a site and the person that they're trying to find, just the trail goes dead. It goes cold. The tracking dogs, everything goes cold, and they're actually in the middle of a field or on a rocky mountain. It just goes cold. I've not encountered so much of that in the interviews that I've done. People have found prints and tracks that go off and they continue, but they just stop following them because they're afraid. They start getting in deeper, darker forest, or they go extensively in a distance they just don't want to follow, and they get a little afraid. But I've not encountered so much of that where they just go cold like that, and the possibility of a portal.
Yeah, but it just makes me wonder, some of this stuff, could be, from another dimension. Because he also mentioned that him and another ranger, again, law enforcement, there was a fatality, auto accident in one of the, campgrounds. And they had to block off the road and they had the flares out. And as they were waiting for the paramedics to come, because they couldn't do anything more at that point, they were next to their vehicle and talking for a minute on the passenger side. And they looked, somehow one of them looked in the side of the cab of the truck and saw on a reflection of a hideous monster on the passenger front door window. And then the other ranger looked, and it scared him, terrified him. And then poof, it was gone.
Yeah, and that's happened in the least likely areas too. I mean, that's what catches people off guard. We're told as kids that monsters don't exist, that we're frightened. We jump to the bed at night when we flip the light off to the room, and we make sure our parents look in the closets and under the bed. And then as an adult, on the least likely day that a person's ready to go hunt that first deer season, they're feeling good, the first time they've been away from the job, or someone is dumping trash in an alleyway, and the alleyway is very close to the outskirts of a tree line, or a farmer is plowing a field and sees something in the tree line. It's that split-second moment that they find out that, and people have used this term quite a bit, is that are not really into the Bigfoot phenomenon, is they'll say, I saw a monster, Lance. I didn't know they existed, but I saw this thing and it was massive. Or I saw this thing as big as it was. How does that thing move so freaking fast? And so in a split second, they find out that the reality that these things exist. And so at that point in time, fear goes through them. It depends on the distance of this encounter or the sighting. And then the next level is this obsessive compulsive, I got to know more. I got to know more. How come no one told me about this? I interviewed a lady a few months ago that had a terrible encounter. Her and a friend back in high school in Tennessee. They went out to a national park. And I asked her, why did you contact me? She said, I want to let everyone know, if I could tell the world that these creatures, how come no one told us that these things exist? If we would have known, we would have been more cautious. We wouldn't have gone as far in the woods. We would have taken more people with us. At least we would have had some background or knowledge of their existence and known what to do and not to do. She said, but we didn't know. we had an encounter, a very, very close encounter, and it really has bothered them for a long time. So much so that her friend, we believe, she just couldn't handle coping, and unfortunately, she took her life.
Well, the stress, I still have nightmares. After all that, I'll go months without having a dream, and then all of a sudden, I wake up in a sweat, and I had a dream of my encounter. It was not a friendly thing. In fact, it even destroyed my friendship and we were really good friends because he was just opening up his medical practice. His father was a Superior Court judge in Pierce County. His brother was a criminal attorney in Pierce County, and they were bankrolling his new, his office. And he was terrified if it got out that he saw a Bigfoot. People aren't going to go see him as a doctor. They would be scared off of.
That is an extremely good point, Gary, is that people, we've always been told people fear to talk in front of people up on stage and everything. But I think there's more fear in what people think about you. The fear of ridicule and embarrassment is extremely strong. And especially if you're in a particular career or occupation. And I've seen this over and over again. And this is why I say, for every person that calls me or directly or emails me and I get to interview them, I say there is at least 2 to 3 dozen more for every call that comes in that will never talk to anybody because they've kept their encounter so close to their chest. They are afraid of ridicule, embarrassment, or they're just afraid they might lose their job. They're going to be viewed as a nut, as cuckoo. And so they will go to their grave not telling anybody. They might tell a couple people. But also there's generational issues where, certain generations, you just didn't talk about that stuff. You just kept it close. And then other generations might talk about it, but they're still very cautious on who they tell. And I always like to tell people, especially the people I'm interviewing, it's okay to be cautious with who you tell your story to. Because even Jordan Peterson, who's kind of like the thinker of our day, he says, be careful who you share good information with and bad information with, because it can harm you either way. And so I just say, really be cautious who you share it with. And this is why it's important, and I think it works well for me and my show, is we've had some encounters and I know where they're coming from. And people will have triggers. Like there's a trigger for whatever it was. Something will trigger a smell, a memory, and they'll take them back to that moment. And they feel, especially when they're retelling it, and they start hyperventilating. They may cry. They have to slow down. And I'll say, go get a drink, come back. It's okay. It's okay. Take your time. And because talking about it is a trigger, they're reliving that moment, that event that was very real. It was very substantive. It was very raw, and they just puts them back in that moment. And that's when you know that this person is not fibbing you. They saw something that they just have no explanation for.
Well, here's the point. 20 years ago, if you were with a group of people and somebody started talking about UFOs or grays, the ETs, you kind of would look at the people, look at their shoes and go up to their face and look at them and take a couple steps back, and you'd say to yourself, I think this person's crazy. Mm-hmm. And that has totally changed because of what has happened in the last year or two. It's gone bizarre. You have people that have had real encounters, and you had a lot of people out there, whistleblowers, that are into it for the money, nothing more, and they're lying. But here's the same thing, though. With Bigfoot, we don't have a real disclosure movement like they have right now with UAPs. And here's the thing. It is real. I mean, if you look at what happened in Alaska, if you look at all these different things where, Bigfoot exists, is proof that they exist. Now, the question I have with you is, why haven't the hell we found a body yet?
Well, I think we have, Gary. I think it just depends on who you're asking that question to. So if you're asking the question to me as Lance, the podcast host, the researcher, going in the field and doing all these interviews, I'm going to say I personally haven't, nor do I know anyone personally next to me that has. But so as a civilian, have not. Researchers find specimens, clumps of hair. We cast prints. We hear vocalizations. We hear tree crashes, tree twist, branch breaks, tree structures. But now, if you're asking me, saying, well, the other part of that question is, have we found a body? Do we know what the anatomy internally looks like and the physiology? I'm going to say yes, but it's not a civilian level. I'm going to say this falls underneath another why a lot of these instances, these encounters and sightings get suppressed, is that in doing this, and I was green at all this when I got started, but I started finding out through eyewitnesses and through my computer and phone having some funny business happen to it, that there is a group of people. Exactly who they work for, we don't know. They don't divulge it. I know many times they've been given the moniker, MIBs. But I think that this group has part a non-governmental entity attached to it, like a contracted group, as well as I think there might be some aspects of it that are like special forces aspects to it. And I think these people are very well schooled on how to conduct questions, and in some cases, more or less, you could say even a psychological profiling. In other words, and if you're questioned and they come to you, they already know everything about you. They're just seeing how truthful you're going to be, but they're very, very vague and open-ended in their questions. I've had this happen dozens of times of people that's contacted me having a close encounter with a Sasquatch or a Dogman, and these people show up out of nowhere and they catch you when you're by yourself, and they'll just say, we hear you have a problem. They don't say Sasquatch. They never say creature, monster, dog. They'll never be descriptive. We hear you have a problem. Or or if you catch wind on what they're asking, it would behoove you to never talk about that. You saw a bear, Miss Jones. You saw a bear. Good day. And boom, they're gone. They leave, they depart, they get in their car, they drive off. And in some cases, you turn your back, you look back, they're just like disappeared, gone. So you have this group that's out there that's suppressing some of this. Now, what percentage, I don't know. But you've got this group that's out there, and that's the part that I have a very hard time trying to tell an eyewitness. By the way, what you saw, the creature, it's real. It is real. And I'm very hesitant sometimes to talk about part B of these people because I'm trying to see and get a feel for how much I want to make sure and feed them with a spoon rather than trying to shove an elephant and say, eat. I'm trying to spoon feed the eyewitness to not overwhelm them too much.
Well, can I ask you a question? I heard from a very reliable source about 2 years ago that the government, military, has a group that goes out and hunts them down.
Wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me. I suspect if I was going to form a group, if Lance was going to form a group, how would I form it? What would I do? Well, I would use, and this is just me now, I would use AI to monitor all the possible radio sources, computer sources, cell phone sources, and have keywords or phrases that would come up quick in order to isolate where the next sighting, encounter, or engagement was with a human being. Next, I would have a team that would go out that would isolate and find these creatures. Then I would have this same team would also eliminate. And then I would have an extraction crew come in, take all evidence in the area, take these beings out, helo them out, drive them out, whatever. And then I would have a follow-up of these people that goes through and kind of quarantines people just to make sure to see how stubborn they are and seeing what they saw.
Well, I even heard even some of the people who have talked about it have vanished. So here's the point. And somebody asked me one time, well, why would the government do that? Well, let's say there is a connection of the DNA to humans. That would throw out everything we have ever learned in school, in college, and in science about how humans evolved. Just throw it in the garbage.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it right on the head. I think not only would it throw it in the garbage, but I think I still ask myself and revolve around in my mind that same question. And I think it really comes down to a revenue standpoint. I think these creatures have been responsible for human abduction. Not in every case. There are humans, unfortunately, that do bad things to humans. And unfortunate weather circumstances and people getting lost just out of their not planning. But I think these creatures have been responsible for abductions. I think that if you let this out, that these creatures have been out, they have abducted humans. They have been around for many years. They are nomadically roaming across the United States freely. I think if you just let this out, and there might be a connection with the Christian doctrine, with Genesis and the Nephilim, and if even that. So I think, if there's a connection with the Christian doctrine, if there's a connection with revenue, I think you've got this team of people that operate on a national security level that they feel they're protecting the public. So they can't let this out. It would cost billions and billions in licensing and revenue loss that there'd be no way they would let that happen. So they keep it close. They keep it quiet. They suppress this information, and they truly feel most likely that they're protecting the public.
Well, they also, again, it goes to the standpoint, no one's going to go out into the woods. No one's going to use any of the federal grounds to go out because they would be terrified if the government came out and said these creatures exist. I mean, the loss of income would be huge.
Oh, it'd be in the billions of dollars.
Yeah.
I saw where just Yellowstone or Yosemite alone in annual income, including the local towns that they're by, they generate annually, I can't remember which of those, $500 million to $800 million a year. So, and then you hit it, I'm glad you hit on this. We're very much, the way I look at it, very much an analogy to the UFO community. There have been high brass officials whistleblow on the UFOs, the UAP phenomenon, but we really haven't had any military whistleblowers in this creature cryptid community yet. And that's why we don't, I think it very much parallels the UFO community with the suppression of information for decades, but we haven't had that deep, unacknowledged program, project level of whistleblowing going on because no one has stepped forward yet. And in that environment of this black operations, and I do believe it's a black operation, a dark operation, they don't whistleblow too much because, like you said earlier, they may not come back. Even the watchers are being watched.
Well, if you really think about it, loggers, there's been so many going back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even in my state where they would be out, chopping trees down deep in the, in the woods, miles away from civilization. And they heard tree knocks. They saw things that look like a giant bear, but more human. I mean, it's all been reported, not just in our country, but if you think about it, worldwide. Globally. This has been going on in folklore. If you go into China, if you go into all these other countries, they have these type of creatures. And, yes. Again, it goes back. So it goes back hundreds of years or more. It tells me that these things they do exist.
They absolutely do. And you have people from all walks of life, all cultural backgrounds, all denominations reporting these creatures. And these are people, most of the people that I interview were never into this phenomenon. They were just your everyday hardworking American that wants to go to work, that wants to take their family out on vacation, that goes gets groceries, pays their bill. They're really not. They don't go to conferences. They don't follow a podcast show. These are the first time eyewitness accounts, and they have an encounter, and they want to find out what they saw. And so that's where they investigate. They look online and they find me or they find someone else, and they start looking at this going, oh my gosh, other people have seen this too. I'm not crazy.
I don't know if you have found this, like other, like what I talk about mainly is UAPs and all kinds of stuff. But here's the problem. Like when it comes to UAPs, you got literally thousands and thousands of podcasts that give a lot of hype. They spread BS. They don't care if it's true or not because all they care about is ratings, clickbait. Are you finding that at all is what you do too? Yes. There's a group of them doing the same type of thing?
Yeah, and I do believe that's so. I'm in the process of writing a book right now, and one of the chapters is talking about podcasts. And like anything, it's almost, this Pareto principle, this 80-20 rule, I think applies just about everything universally. And I think that since YouTube has come out that you can monetize or make a living at it, is that, people, the key that you have when you're a podcaster is you need content, constant content, and you need to be consistent on putting that content on. And if you have constant content, and a lot of people don't have it. So what I think happens is either they're retailing someone else's content in a different way or manner, which you can do that, or if you can't find it, you make it up. So I always say, I have people sending me pictures and videos all the time, and I would say probably 95% are hoaxed. Now with AI getting better and better and better, we're going to see more of it. And I think that a lot of stories, especially people, because you have the cryptid community has the Scary Story Time podcast versus a podcast that people are being interviewed and tell their account of what they saw. So there is kind of that division. But sometimes people don't care if it's real or not. They just want to be scared. But when you talk to an eyewitness who had an encounter very similar to what you had, they take offense to that. It hit them personally. And they have triggers and they still have nightmares years and years later. And they take it personally. They don't like people talking about this as if it was just the Easter Bunny or make-believe stuff.
Well, I agree 100% with you. Again, too, is I podcasting, because I've been in broadcasting since 1970. And what I have found here in the last 2-3 years, that it's gone to what, because everybody wants to be a podcaster. They don't know what they're doing, and they spread a lot of gossip or misinformation thinking, that's going to get me more listeners. And it's really out of control. A lot of people say, well, hey, how come you have this many subscribers and I don't? Well, you know what? I don't spread garbage. I will never do that.
Yeah, I see this, and that you hit it right on the head again, Gary, is that a lot of people, they will, I don't like this person, and this group is wrong, and this group is right, and they believe it's bipedal, no, they're quadrupeds, and they're on the hominin, no, it's hominoid. I don't get into that, honestly. I just know this: treat everybody with kindness and respect. Do not judge anyone's story. I wasn't there, but I do want to hear it, because we can always learn from an encounter, just like I learned from yours just now, a moment ago. And the thing that I've realized, stay neutral, be professional, be kind, ask good questions, give time for them to, speak. And I don't get into all of that garbage and people talking back and forth. I'm so out of tune with it, and I'm glad I am. I've got enough busyness with my show and the people that call in, and then outside of that, I'm doing chores on my homestead and stuff. I just kind of intentionally stay away from that, and because I just don't think it's good for podcasters or people in radio in general. And I just think that people want to hear something different, professional, non-judgmental, and give an analysis of what I think afterwards.
And you're right. Now we got to take this break, and we'll come back. We'll take one or two calls, or we'll try to anyway, and we'll be back with Lance right after this. So stay tuned.
Coming to you from the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network newsroom, I'm Guy Ticker with the strange news. Mythical creature sightings in Philippines spark panic. Police in the Philippines are attempting to put down a panic that has erupted in a city after two girls claim to have encountered a fearsome mythical creature known as a manananggal. The strange sighting soon spread like wildfire in the community, and concerns surrounding the incident were compounded when, a few days later, it was said that a creature with the head of a pig and the body of a human had been seen in a nearby town. I'm Guy Ticker. The strange news is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Do you have a strange story? Contact us at nightdreamstalkradio.com. Available now. Bigfoot Origins, The Search for the Cryptid Homeland by Mike Dupler. This is the most comprehensive and in-depth examination of Bigfoot ever written. How did Bigfoot in North America, the Yowie in Australia, and the Woodwoes, Britain's Bigfoot, get to where they are today? Mike Dupler connects the dots, and the conclusions are incredible. This changes everything. Don't be left out in the woods, in the cold, not knowing. Read Bigfoot Origins, The Search for the Cryptid Homeland by Mike Dupler. Available now on Amazon.
And we are back. First thing I want to say is, we have two Great Danes, a German Shepherd, and I find that if you feed, your animals like human type of food, they're going to live a lot longer. Our last dog lived to 20 years because we fed it human type of food. So compared to dry dog food and all that other stuff, which is very unhealthy for your animal. That's why we use the farmer's dog food. And I'll tell you what, since we have done that, I've noticed their coats have gotten nicer. And our Great Danes are pushing 8 years old, and they were getting to the point where they didn't even like walking. They're back out running and barking and doing all the stuff they did when they were 2-3 years old. So check out the farmer's fresh food. Now we're back with Lance, and we got a caller. Let's take the caller and see what they have a question about. Okay, who do we have?
Hi, this is Barb.
Hi, Barb. How are you doing? And did you have a great Thanksgiving?
Yep, I ate that turkey.
Okay. What's your question for Lance?
Well, first I want to thank you for being on the show. You seem like you're a very, very, very good guest to have on here. And I wanted to ask you if you've ever had any calls from Ohio or done any research in Ohio.
And that it's amazing you asked that question, Barb. That one of the, in fact, most terrifying Sasquatch encounters came out of Central Ohio. And I took that call back in 2017. We were still kind of a new podcast show. And you can go back and listen to that show. But it's basically where two cousins were attacked by a Sasquatch while fishing. And the cousin up in the boat was having rocks thrown, and he saw something on this island that was out in this reservoir. And he had one cousin, he said, "Take me up there." The cousin reluctantly took him, with the trolling motor up to the shore, and therefore what ensued was an attack. The one cousin brought the other cousin in. For lack of a better word, all hell broke loose. They called the game department, police, and ended up in the hospital. And it played out like this incredible movie. And the cousin was baffled that I was interviewing. He called me 3 days later, was still in shock, was in trauma, and I kind of walked him through what was going on. And what ensued was just incredible, how these people that were on the scene really tried to suppress the whole thing that ever happened. And to this day, he's still being monitored. That is one site that I want to go back and take my listeners and go to that very site of what happened and where it happened.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, good questions, Barb.
Yeah, great question.
You know, again, there's been so many reports of, Bigfoot, actually hunters disappearing when they go out, law enforcement going out looking for the person that is like never came back home. They found bits and parts of their clothing. They found in one case, I can't remember which one it was, where a rifle was wrapped around a tree. I don't know any human, unless you're Arnold, it could do something like that. And I don't think he could do that.
No, I mean, you're talking, a rifle is tempered steel. I mean, this is hard. It has to contain high combustible explosive that is, directed in a certain direction, obviously. And so for something to do that like that, no human can do. And, I encountered some neighbors as the crow flies from me about 3.5 miles, and they have what's called bull wire. And bull wire is about the diameter of your pinky. And it's to contain bulls. Usually comes in a 16-foot panel with about 6-inch squares. And it's just tougher than nails. There's no way a human can bend this stuff. And I went over there, and she informed me that her turkeys and her chickens were all running loose one morning, and this bull wire had been pushed to the ground like a banana peel. And she had her son trying to run over it to straighten out so she could repurpose it and reuse it. And I said, "Oh, wait a minute. Can I have that?" She says, "Well, okay." And I said, "I'll get you a new one." And she said, No, that's okay. Just take it, Lance." And I still have it. And there's no way a human could do that. There's no way a human can bend that. I tried personally on one end of it. There's no way. And so we know that something other than a human did this. And what else would do this near a chicken pen or a guinea farm? She had turkeys, guineas, and chickens, and she was actually missing some. So we suspect that, and she lives near this core land, where deep, bottom, woodsy, really creepy. And we suspect that she had some Sasquatch problems going on.
Now, have you ever seen one?
I have. I was about 7 years old, and I lived outside of Braggs, Oklahoma. And Braggs is kind of noted because it's where the Hurricane Katrina, where the Camp Gruber's at. But Braggs is just a small little community. It's near Greenleaf State Park. And we lived about 5 miles outside on the sand hills. The roads are literally graded. And I was tasked to put some straw on a garden, on some strawberries. My dad worked in Muskogee. And of course, like any typical 7-year-old, I procrastinated to the last part of the day. And I realized if I didn't hurry up and get done, then my hiney would feel it. So I rushed out to the garden, which was a ways from the house near the wood line. And I went to the back of the garden, which was nearest the tree line, and I was putting straw on, and I was just doing my thing. And normally you hear whippoorwills in the evening and birds and chirping. And all of a sudden, I just remember I stopped because everything stopped. There was no sound. And as a 7-year-old, I thought, that's so weird. Nothing. And so I'm looking around like, I don't understand. And something, for whatever reason, told me to squat down. And I squatted down, and I'm looking west. So now the sun's not in my eyes, and I'm looking into the trees and the saplings, and I see this figure, a silhouette I could see a head, no neck, shoulders, really wide shoulders. I can see the gap between the torso and the arms. And then the hands kind of fade into the grass, and the feet. I couldn't see the feet. It just kind of faded in the Johnson grass. And I see this thing, and I'm yelling, "Hey, I think it's a human, someone trying to play a trick." I don't smell anything. I don't hear anything, but I see this silhouette. And it just creeped me out. And I'm looking at this thing, yelling, "Hey, you better stop it." I start backing up. I drop my straw. I back up. I get on my bike. I tell my mom. And she comes out. She goes, show me, show me. I said, it was right here. And I looked, and it was gone. I said, it was right there. And my mom, being mom, she goes, well, okay, Lance, just go ahead and get this done before your dad comes home. Well, later that night, or I think it was that night, by my bedroom window, I had growling outside the window, and I was on the top bunk. And my mom, being short, she couldn't reach the curtains to the top. And so there was a gap open that the window I could see out. And when I heard the growling, I woke up, and I didn't know why I woke up. Everybody was asleep, and I'm like, why did I wake up? And I'm looking at the ceiling, and then I heard this low outside my window. And I could tell it was right up high near where I was at. And I didn't ever turn to look, because I just had this, if I would have looked, I was afraid that I would see something that I couldn't remove from my memory for a life. So I was trembling so bad in bed, I was in shock, that I woke my brother up from the bottom bunk, who kept yelling my name, and I couldn't get my name out. And finally, he got out of bed and poked me. He didn't like it, so he went and got my mom. She came in. She checked my head. Did I have a fever? And finally, I got the words out, I'm fine. I'm fine. I told my parents again, of course, his parents, oh, you'll be fine, Lance, you had a bad dream. But I know what I experienced. Now, I didn't see it like face to face. I was too frightened, but that was my experience at 7 years old out there.
Now, you didn't go under the bed or pull the blanket over you?
I didn't, because I was afraid if I moved that something would happen. It'd bust through the window, because these are the single pane windows. So there was probably quite a bit of air that could get around, back in they all sweat during the winter. And I just froze, that primitive part of the brain says freeze. Well, I froze, and I didn't put a sheet over. I was just staring at the ceiling, and I was trembling so bad. And I so vividly remember that. And it scared my brother, because he didn't know what was going on. But the other thing, too, is there was a nightlight outside, a vapor light, and I normally could see the shadow on the wall. Well, during this time, that the light was covered. It was dark at the window, so I knew something was there. And then by the time my brother poked me, I was looking on the ceiling and there was light, and I'm like, okay, whatever it was gone. So I started to calm down, and that's when my voice came back. And that's what I remember at 7.
Yeah, and that is what influenced you your whole life, hasn't it?
That was the start of it. My brother Lane had an encounter west of Watonga, Oklahoma, that really, really put me in full swing after that. And it took him, this was back in 93, but that is on my podcast show. It's my brother Lane. He in an incident near the North Canadian River.
What happened?
And basically, a friend of his, and they haven't seen each other in a while. They go into town. They do grab some beer, some ice, some fishing tackle, some bait, and they're going to go west of town. And my brother's friend said, hey, I know a good place to go fishing. It's an old party location where the high schoolers go, and it's kind of remote, and nobody will bother us. And my brother said, sure, I'll go. So my brother leaves his vehicle at his friend's place. They take his truck, and they go out there. And it's about 3 miles outside of town. And you kind of have to go down this section road, that section road, this section road, and finally get to the North Canadian River. They back the truck in, and no sooner had they pulled in, and the sun has set, but there's still that twilight. And they cracked open a beer, but no sooner had they cracked open a beer, and they're just trying to catch up and talk. They're not even out of the cab of the truck yet. And my brother looks out in front of the field, and it's a beautiful wheat field that's probably knee high. And he's looking out there, and his friend Eddie was talking, and my brother sees something coming across the field, and it looks kind of gray and white. And my brother taps his friend who's still talking, goes, hey. He goes, look at my finger. And his friend goes, what? He goes, just look at my finger. You see it? He goes, yeah. And he goes, follow where my finger's going and follow it. What do you see? And finally he goes, yeah, I see it. And it's moving so fast and so smooth. There's no head bobbing. And it's just so fluid as it looked like an apparition, my brother said. And then it disappeared in the tree line that they're next to. There's a row of trees next to the river that the farmer didn't take out. And then it's dead quiet. They got the windows down. They're still in the truck, and they hear this branch breaking. Pow! Pow! And my brother said it was like baseball bats being broke. And you could tell it was green cedar limbs and fresh limbs. It was just had this echo down in that river bottom. And it was getting closer. And my brother's friend said, let's go. And Lane goes, wait, I got to see this thing. Well, behind them is an opening. The tree line opened up, and it was just beach to the river. Finally, my brother now is facing outside of his passenger window looking back. And his buddy is looking through what's called the headache rack of the truck. And he's looking through, and he's smoking, and he's nervous. And they're looking, and this thing steps out, and you could see it profiled, and then it turns in unison. It doesn't turn the head. It turns all together, the whole body, and stands there. And it's probably about 50 feet from behind the truck, 60 feet. And then it just stands there, and then it starts to sway like this. And my brother said, I can see the space between the torso and the hands, and you could see the hands were longer than that knee joint. He said it had a conical type of head, no neck. He said the shoulders, we were just talking about it yesterday, believe it or not. The shoulders were so out of proportion, so supernaturally large. He said it was around 4.5 to 5 feet wide at the shoulders. And this thing starts swaying like this. And my brother had a pistol pointing, saying, if you're a human, stop playing around. I'm serious. Stop. I've got a gun. Stop playing around. Nothing. No sound. Nothing. No vocalization. And finally, it had enough, and it took a giant leap. My brother said it got on them that fast. Eddie started the truck, was starting to kick dirt up, and it went right into this creature's face, which probably ticked it off, and it started chasing them in the truck as they were fishtailing out of there. Eddie was in a panic. He was in shock. They were going down this dirt road, and my brother's still hanging out the window, and when Eddie hit the brake, my brother could see the reflective red on its face, and it was reaching toward the bed of the truck.
That's scary.
And he's in a panic, like, what is going on? What is this thing? He never fired a shot because something in the brain said this still could be human. This still could be human. But it's too big to be human. What's going on? Finally, they lost it in the cloud of dust, and they got to the road. And Eddie stopped the truck, and he's looking forward. And Eddie says, what did we see? What happened? What is that? And my brother said, I don't know, but I think that is a Bigfoot. I said, they're real now. I never thought they were real, but they're real. They drove back to the house. They didn't speak a word, and they kept it quiet. And my brother didn't tell even us for 2 years. And finally he told us. And when he did, I've asked him hundreds of times of that incident, and he's not changed one time. What happened?
Well, again, it proves that they are aggressive too. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it was aggressive. I'm just wondering what would have happened if they didn't get the truck going on time and took off.
Well, I know, and that's the thing that we kind of postulate many times. What would have happened? What would have done had it caught the truck? A couple features of this one that's interesting is that my brother said while it was standing there, it was a pewter, the moon was out. And although you can't really get a lot of details, it was close enough that he said it was like a pewter gray color.
Yeah.
So he thinks that this was an older one, but it did not have any slowness to it. It advanced on them so fast, he said, it didn't even appear real. He was just there. And why was it aggressive? When we think about this so many times, we think that this was a hunting area, or there was members of this party in that area, and this was a very common area to hunt in. North Canadian and the South Canadian river bottoms in Oklahoma and so many of the river systems is so thick with hogs, deer, wildlife, And I tell you, it's pretty creepy at night to be on those river bottoms at night.
Oh, I wouldn't want to be. But here's the thing. You mentioned the gray. You know, again, to me, the complexion, what I saw was kind of like between what we look like and a grayish tint to it. And no neck. Absolutely no neck. And the point is, when I saw that thing at the tree where I paid a little bit more attention to it, when it moved and was changing position to look at us, it was moving its body. Like if you had a problem with your neck where you couldn't turn your head, that's what it was like. It was like, have you ever seen somebody that kind of turns their whole body, the torso, to, you know?
Yes. In fact, that's exactly the way my brother said it turned. You know, I've been in chiropractic for 27 years before I retired. And, you know, that was my job, was to help people get them out of pain, get rotation back, get motion back in the cervical spine, the lumbar spine, thoracic spine. And, you know, there were certain ranges of motion that's normal for a human. But this creature, my brother said, it moved in unison, like it was all stiff, like it had a fusion of its spine. It just turned in unison and looked at them. And so you're describing exactly the way he said it turned and looked at them.
Yeah, I don't know if they have the head movement, but the way from my seen, if they do have it, they don't have much movement. That's the point. And again, no neck. And again, a lot of people describe them as being like dark in color. What I saw, it wasn't dark in color. Again, like I said, it was between what we look like and a grayish tint, like after somebody's been dead for a while. That type of look. Again, you're right on the head part, and you know it had a flat kind of nose, but it had big eyes, and it didn't look like an ape, and it didn't look like a human. It's really hard to describe. You know, I have tried all these years to like draw what it looked like, and I can't seem to do it because I was so scared. I just didn't concentrate on it.
You know, that's a very good point you make too, because a lot of these eyewitnesses, I'll say, can you draw it? And they go, Lance, I have a hard time because I was looking at it, but I wasn't looking at it. I was so frightened. I was trying to process so much in my head what I was looking at that was it human, was it not, that I really didn't see a ton of details. I can tell you in general details, and sometimes when they retell the story and I ask them again or I recall them, every once in a while they'll have a little bit of a nugget that they forgot. Like, oh, yes, I saw the lip curl up and it looked like bubble gum. I remember that. And it's not that this eyewitness is trying to make things up. It's just that they're trying to slow the image down and process. And it's like recalling it again. Then when they settle down, the mind settles down and relaxes. It's able to recall the details. And that's very typical of encounters that happen. They just process, it's a monster, it's fearful, it's terrible. And as they calm down and weeks and months later, they start to remember some details. That's a very common feature.
Well, I will say this. What I remember, I saw its teeth when it was, you know, just off the car, that tree. And the teeth were huge and they were sharp, not like our teeth. Now, did your brothers notice the teeth?
He said that it never did show its teeth. It really didn't have its mouth. It had its mouth open, but a little bit, but he couldn't really see the teeth. The only time he could see any facial features is when Eddie was pulling the truck away, driving like crazy, and he was trying to round a corner going too fast, and he hit that brake, and that brake light really reflected off the face, and that's when he saw the hand coming, and it missed the tailgate, and he could see the brow ridge, dark sockets, like the eyes. He saw that it was, he knew it was conical because he could see that in the moonlight, but he could see that there was just a little patch of hair on the cheek, and it had like a beard coming down, and that it was just so incredibly supernaturally massive. That's the part that he said it didn't look real because of how overly massive this thing was at that distance. You can't, as Wiley Dave would say, people aren't ready to see this. They're just not ready to see something like this.
It's terrifying. Like I said,
Yes.
it was terrifying for me. And again, when you talk about the forehead, again, the hair, how can I say it, was down lower than the human, but there was a bare stretch of skin, and eyebrows. I didn't see eyebrows as such, at least from what I remember. But I also remember the mouth in the head was wider than a human head would be, shaped more, grotesque. And the mouth was, and thick lips. I remember the thick lips. I remember the larger mouth. And again, the teeth were like canine type of teeth. I mean, that type of sharpness, that I remembered. And then again, no neck. And now my question for you, did your brother talk about the stench?
No, he said that, now there may have been, he said, this is what he said. He said there may have been, but because of maybe the wind, how it was blowing, there wasn't much wind that night. And therefore, since there wasn't much wind, it was really quiet. But if there may have been enough of a breeze, not in their favor, so to speak, but there was no stench, there was no vocalization. So the only thing that obviously is they saw the creature first coming across the field, kind of at a diagonal, kind of at an oblique angle, what we would say. So it wasn't coming at them, but away from them, but still getting closer as it approached the tree line. And then what they heard was the branch breaking, which I have had a lot of eyewitnesses say that they have heard this branch breaking. It's the lady that I did the interview a couple months ago. That's what they did when they were setting up camp, this pow, pow. And the best we can deduce is that this is a sign of aggression, like you need to leave this area. I'm letting you know I'm here and I don't like it that you're here and you need to leave. I mean, obviously that's the sign of aggression, of force, breaking something. And my brother said it sounded like baseball bats being broke. And it was so quiet that night, it just echoed down in that river bottom.
Well, I don't know many animals that could take a 4-inch tree, like a fir tree, and just bend it over and have it, just boom. That's what I remember. And that was scary. But again, it yelled 2 times. Once when it saw us on the other side of the creek, it screamed like the loudest scream. It just gave me goosebumps. Then when we got into the car, it was looking at it and screaming, and it was so loud. And and then it also had like a deep what do you call it, when somebody goes type of noise was in it. Yeah, it did that, and then the scream followed, and it stared right at me. Man. And I mean, it locked eyes on me. And I tell you, I was, like I said, I was terrified. So again, like I said at the beginning of the show, maybe if you're in an area that's more populated with humans, but if you really want to go out looking for Bigfoot, you want to go out in an area where there isn't a lot of humans walking around.
That's right. And be, my buddy Wiley Dave says, be very careful what you want, because most people aren't ready to see this. And heaven forbid, what if you guys had the car further away?
Oh, well, I wouldn't be here. I know for a fact, I wouldn't have been here. I feel it. I felt it then, and it shook me.
Man. Yeah, that's terrifying to even hear. I just, my buddy Wiley Dave said, he just keeps saying people aren't ready. They're not ready in so many different ways. When I say they're not ready to see it. They're not ready to emotionally deal with this and cope with it, because you never forget it. The only thing you can do is learn how to cope with what you saw and try to place in your mind, file it away so you can at least behave quote unquote normally and work and behave in normal social human structures out there, because you're realizing that you are a small fraction of the population that saw something that it's not supposed to exist, but it does.
Oh, you're right.
And there's hundreds of people that have, but you've seen something so terrifying that's not supposed to exist, and yet you still have this group of people. Oh, it doesn't, but it does. It really does. And that's the terrifying part. Monsters do exist.
Well, I know for a fact, and Rory out there wanted to know if it was a human scream. I don't know any human could have made that type of scream. It was way more powerful than any human could do. It went real high pitch, and it again, it was the look at his eyes, and when I could see its teeth when it was screaming. I can tell you, it was not something I'd ever want to see again. And think about this. There's a lot of people, even when I had Christopher George on, and you need to get him on your show.
Okay.
And we'll give you his number. Here's the thing is, being a law enforcement ranger, he told us of all these scary stories that I can't talk on my show because I have somebody that doesn't like me, so they hit me with violations. But that there's a lot of people missing every year in the forest, in those woods, and they find no traces of them, or little bits of traces of the people, and the government covers it up. That's what he said. Even when he writes a report, he sends it in because he has to send it in. And there's been times he wanted to look at that report to see if anything has been done. He doesn't have any access to it.
See,
he's locked out of it.
I've always said there's two reports. Now, this is I do need to talk to him. I've always said there's two reports. There's the real report that the ranger writes. Then there's the report that goes and is documented for public records if anyone ever wants to attain them. So that's just my theory. I can't prove that, but that's just what makes sense to me. And this is one of the reasons it gets back to our question. I think that these creatures have the sightings, eyewitness sightings, especially close encounters, get suppressed, especially if there was a human that was injured, or a human shot one, or there was property damage. There was physical property damage, like a truck, a car, a fence, a home. These people are on the site, Johnny on the spot, within days. And they monitor these eyewitnesses, if not contact them. And how they do it, my gut tells me they're using AI to do it, because there's so many different sources of intel coming in all the time, all these platforms and radios and scanners. AI could do all that fast. And so I think they're using it, and have been using AI for a few decades. We get information, civilians, we're the last to get the cell phone, the AI, the optic cables. That stuff has been out there years before we had access to it.
Yeah, and a bad thing about AI, what you mentioned at the beginning of the show, you can create videos or images that, again, like I told you before we went on the air, my other hobby in life was photography. And it still is a big part of my life. And I couldn't even do what I did in the darkroom, what you can do now with AI. It's harder to really look at something and say, was that real, or was that generated with AI? Is that UFO a real UFO, or was that generated on AI? And it's enough, even with my sophisticated software I have, it takes me a long time to debunk something now. And that's how good, and it's improving realistically more and more every day.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I think it's at a pace exponentially, where in I would say in a couple years from now, it will be so hard to discern what is real and what is not real. And that's the part that's going to get scary. What content is real? What is not real? And, when you think of that, you go, well, all you have to do is persuade people of an opinion, and something looks real, then you can persuade them to do something, not do something, like something. And so it is getting very hard. Right now, our eyes can discern it and go, oh, that looks kind of fishy. That doesn't look right. I would say in a few years, we won't be able to tell.
No, and here's another thing, too, with a lot of people, and I'm not going to mention his name, but there's one famous person out there when it comes to Bigfoot who captured the sounds, the Sierra sounds of Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the point. For years, they pushed that they were living, breathing creatures. And what happens is after many years, either they get burned out on it, or they their books aren't selling, or whatever the problem is. Then they come up and say, well, it's interdimensional. And it's not flesh and blood. And that is what really, I don't think they are interdimensional. I really don't, because what I seen was real.
Yeah, I'm in agreement along with you. I see, and Wally Dave, my buddy, saw a physical creature that was salivating, and it's what we now know as the Dogman creature in 2013 when he was by himself in Beaver County in western Oklahoma. And he said it was flesh and blood. He called it up on a call he made, and only a flesh and blood type of animal would have that craving or that desire to come in on that distress call. And so my brother Lane, I've talked to him about this too. He said, I didn't see an apparition. I saw a flesh and blood physical being, a creature that was massive in size, chase us. I know what we saw. And there's no denying that. It wasn't anything else that I've ever seen in my life. And his friend never wanted to really talk about it again. And so I'm always that's a good question that gets brought up a lot about this interdimensional. And I just have a hard time, for me personally, swallowing that pill, because of the people that I do interviews on the show, we're all assuming and talking the same language of it's a flesh and blood creature.
Well, it is. And I'm not going to change my view on it. It just seems like people, go that way. If it's ufology or Bigfoot or Dogman or whatever it is, they get burned out after a while. And so they start looking for another, or they're not popular on the circuit anymore. So they come up, well, it's interdimensional. Well, then, I don't buy that. I just don't buy that. And, again, about Dogmen. I've had so many people for the years say Dogmen have never hurt a human. Well, I was reading about, cases here recently going back to like 1900, for example, and even up to 1920, where Dogmen encountered and killed farmers, killed their livestock, did all this stuff. So what is that? I mean, again, is it people in their mind think that a Dogman would never hurt anybody?
I don't know. I think people, Dr. David Buss is a world-renowned psychologist, and he talks about that, humans have 24 biases. And one of the biases is that we suffer from is called the certainty bias. And the certainty bias says, I'm so certain I'm right and you're wrong, I'm certain of it. And so it sounds kind of funny to say, but I think people get in this corner of absolutes, and how they get there, I don't know. Maybe they've listened to 24 podcast shows in a row and they think they're an expert, or they've listened to, a year's worth of podcasts and all of a sudden everybody's an expert. When actually I've never considered myself, I know more than the average person, but I've always considered myself a student of learning. And I never want to pigeonhole even myself that I know everything, because I don't. As soon as you say you know everything, something surprisingly comes your way and you go, wow, I had no clue. That is really interesting. But I think people suffer from this absolute where they know what they know, and there's it's this way all the time. Everybody knows that, which that's not true. I always leave a back door for me learning. Yeah.
Well, you have to. Now, how can people find, and what night do you come out on with your show? Is it live? Is it recorded? Well, tell us about it.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. So so far, I've not been live yet, but I'm actually working my way in 2026 to do just that, Gary. So I appreciate you asking. Really, right now, how people can get a hold of me or the show is I'm on YouTube under Monster 911, and I put a show out typically every 2 weeks. Right now, I'm kind of running behind with the Thanksgiving holiday weekend. I've got family over, and I like to put my time into the show. I have enough content right now for the next year and a half. I've been blessed by having a lot of people contact me. They can if someone has a report, they can contact the toll-free number that I have on the show, which I put on every show, or they can email me at the monster911 podcast at gmail.com. And but right now it's on YouTube, and I'm in that process. Hopefully I'll finish up my book in the spring. And then I'm adding the website and some other things. It's just kind of domino effect for 2026. So right now it's just through the show.
That is fantastic. And again, don't hang up. I want to talk to you for a minute after the show. I want to thank you so much for coming on. And how can they contact you if they have a story of an encounter?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be a Sasquatch or Dogman. I've got people calling me with UFOs, sea creatures, alien type of creatures. Some of the craziest one has been alien type creature sightings. They can contact me on the toll-free number. It's 866-306-8085, and leave a message. Your call can be confidential. I don't need your name. I don't need your occupation, and we can talk. Or you can, like I said, email me at the monster911podcast at gmail.com. And then if you just kind of want to see the style of my interviews, you can go on YouTube and type in Monster 911, and you can see a collection of some of the interviews that I've done.
Well, great. Again, I want to thank you, Lance, for coming on. And maybe we'll get you on in the future again. We can actually get in some of the case, the stories that people have told you.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on, Gary. I sincerely appreciate it.
Okay, my friend. Well, JC, who's our next guest coming up?
Well, our next guest will be next Friday, December the 5th, and that's going to be Marcus Allen. He's the editor of the UK version of the Nexus magazine.
And then the guest after that?
We're going to have Stan Deo back on. It's been a while since he's been on the show, but he will be on Friday, December the 12th. And he's got some fascinating stuff to talk about.
Oh, yeah. He's always a fantastic guest. Well, everybody, I want you to have a great weekend. I really appreciate, everything that you guys do for the show. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, good or bad, whatever you want to do on the show. And also tomorrow, if you use your cell phone, you can hype the show. So by just it doesn't cost you anything. You just hit the hype button and it gives us points, which then the algorithm keeps sharing it. And I just want to say a big shout out to places like in Greece, Germany, France, Vietnam, India, Paraguay, all our listeners. We're at almost 375,000 subscribers. We're just like about 100 away from that. And we're growing every day. And I think it all comes down to, we don't give out hype. We just give out, a good interview and great guests. Well, JC, you got anything else you want to say before we say goodnight?
No, I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. And listen, some good points were said tonight. If you're going out in the woods, tell somebody where you're going, when you'll be back, and take some kind of protection.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell this, if you hear me kind of like not talking totally coherent, is that a lot of you know that I got false teeth, and I tried a different adhesive tonight, and my teeth were falling out every time I was talking. So it makes it really hard to say certain words when your teeth are wobbling. So there it is. Well, everybody have a good one. We will catch you on the other side.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe
he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's Talk Show Radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers.